You work, you grind, you show up early, you stay late, you play by the rules, and still you struggle, while someone else, less disciplined, less capable, less honest, seems to rise, float, succeed. You tell yourself to wait, to be patient, that maybe, just maybe, one day, it'll pay off. But deep down, there's a voice whispering, something is wrong. And it's not just you. Across cities, countries, generations, the same pattern repeats. The hardest working people remain stuck, while the system praises their effort and rewards something else entirely. Why? Why do the most loyal employees retire broke? Why do the essential workers live paycheck to paycheck, while those detached from labor control the outcome? Is it bad luck? Is it a broken economy? Is it corruption? It's design. What if I told you poverty isn't an accident? That the poor aren't just disadvantaged, they're necessary. What if the system was built to keep them there? Not through violence, not through chains, but through belief, through a moral code carefully installed into minds from childhood. A code that glorifies obedience, that romanticizes suffering, that rewards submission with praise, but never with power. This isn't just a flaw in capitalism or a glitch in democracy. It's older, deeper, more calculated. And 500 years ago, someone saw it, named it, wrote it down. His name was Niccolo Machiavelli, and he warned, the ruling class doesn't maintain control through force alone. They govern through illusion, by giving the people just enough hope to keep them obedient, but never enough power to become dangerous. Hope becomes the leash, morality becomes the muzzle, and poverty becomes sustainable. But here's the part no one wants you to hear. It's not your fault. You were never lazy. You were never stupid. You were trained to believe in a game that was never meant for you to win. Machiavelli knew this. He saw how power operates, not through fairness but through structure, not through honesty but through myth. And what terrified the elite, what they tried to bury, was this. Once you see the game, once you realize the rules were written without you in mind, you stop playing like a pawn. This video is not comfortable. It's not polite. It's not meant to inspire. It's meant to expose, to show you the architecture of control, to name the lie that kept generations loyal, exhausted, and poor, and to hand you the one thing the system cannot tolerate, clarity. Because clarity is the beginning of freedom. If poverty was just about laziness, then why do the hardest working people in society stay poor? Why does the man waking up at 4 a.m. to fix power lines, the woman pulling a double shift at the hospital, the factory worker who stands 10 hours without rest, the delivery driver who eats lunch behind the wheel, why do they live paycheck to paycheck? If hard work equals success, why are the people sacrificing the most? Always the ones with the least. The truth is uncomfortable. You weren't lied to in a flashy way. No one screamed at you to obey. No banners, no sirens, no threats. The lie was whispered, told gently, repeated often. You heard it in school, in church, in your family. If you work hard, life will reward you. If you just keep grinding, the system will notice. But what if the system was never watching? What if the formula effort equals reward was never designed to apply to you? Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He saw a different architecture beneath society, a hidden structure, one where the people at the top need the masses to believe in that formula, but not to benefit from it. Because if the poor stopped believing in the moral value of their labor, if they saw their sacrifice as currency for someone else's gain, they might stop playing the role the system needs. And that's dangerous, because here's the brutal insight. Labor isn't sacred, it's strategic. And the poor, they are not useless, they are essential. Their exhaustion powers the economy. Their compliance keeps the system stable. Their hope fueled by false promises is the lubricant that keeps the machine running. Machiavelli didn't romanticize suffering. He understood power, and in his view, the most dangerous idea isn't rebellion, it's realization. Because when you realize your loyalty is being harvested, when you see that your moral effort is used as fuel, not valued as freedom, you stop asking, "What am I doing wrong?" And you start asking, "Who benefits from me staying tired, obedient, and underpaid?" You were taught to believe that your virtue, your honesty, humility, consistency would be enough to change your fate. But Machiavelli would argue, those traits don't threaten the powerful, they serve them. And the idea that work alone brings dignity? That's not morality, that's management. The painful truth is this: your labor is a resource, and those in power, they don't want resources to rise. They want them reliable, exploitable, replaceable. Which means your poverty isn't a failure of effort, it's a consequence of belief. Belief in a system that rewards labor, when in fact it rewards leverage. You've been taught to serve. They've been trained to scale. And as long as you keep grinding, waiting for recognition, they'll keep climbing, using the structure you were told to worship, not because you're lazy, but because they know the more you believe in the nobility of your suffering, the less likely you are to question why you're still suffering at all. By now, the illusion is cracking. You've worked, you've sacrificed, you've followed the code, and still, you're stuck. So you begin to ask, was the code ever real? Or was it written by someone who never intended to follow it themselves? This is where Machiavelli enters, not as a villain, not as a cynic, but as one of the few minds who dared to say the quiet part out loud. In The Prince and in the letters he never intended for the public, Machiavelli made one thing brutally clear. The powerful do not govern with morality, they govern with perception. Because morality, when weaponized, doesn't liberate the people, it pacifies them. He wrote that the ideal citizen is not angry, not starving, not rebellious, but tired and hopeful. Just hopeful enough to stay obedient, but never powerful enough to rise. It's a brilliant strategy, really. If you keep people poor but feed them just enough possibility, they won't revolt. They'll dream. They'll grind harder, complain less, and quietly blame themselves when the dream doesn't arrive. Machiavelli understood this better than most. He said, "The poor are not dangerous when they're hungry. They become dangerous when they realize they've been deceived." That's why the deception must feel moral, righteous, deserved. You're not broke, you're earning your way. You're not exploited, you're on the path. You're not disposable, you're waiting your turn. But Machiavelli's writings shattered that narrative. He peeled back the curtain. He revealed that the systems of control don't need to use violence if they can sell you a story. And the most powerful story is this: you're close, you're almost there, just one more year, one more promotion, one more sacrifice. They don't have to trap your body if they can imprison your belief. Machiavelli's genius wasn't that he glorified cruelty, it's that he exposed the tools behind obedience. He understood that the key to ruling wasn't punishment, it was illusion, an illusion of fairness, an illusion of progress, an illusion of freedom. Because the moment you truly believe you're free, even when you're not, you won't fight. You'll comply. With conviction, that's the brilliance. That's the horror. You don't just play the game, you defend it. You teach it to your children. You shame those who question it. All while the rewards remain just out of reach, forever moving, forever promised, never delivered. This is not conspiracy. This is design. A structure as old as kingdoms and as modern as your last performance review. The question now isn't whether the game is rigged. The question is, how long will you keep playing it if it was never made for you to win? They'll keep climbing, using the structure you were told to worship, not because you're lazy, but because they know The more you believe in the nobility of your suffering, the less likely you are to question why you're still suffering at all. And that's why the system doesn't need to punish you. It just needs to shape you. It begins early, not with violence, but with curriculum. You're not taught to question. You're taught to wait, to memorize, to repeat, to raise your hand, to ask permission. You're told that your worth lies in compliance, in being helpful, humble, responsible. You're not trained to think like a builder. You're trained to function like a part. If you're born into the working class, your education isn't designed to unlock you. It's designed to prepare you for obedience. You don't leave school asking, "What am I capable of?" You leave asking, "Where do I fit?" And in that quiet shift from curiosity to conformity, the system wins its first battle. Then comes the next layer, morality, not the kind born of conscience, but the kind installed through doctrine. You're told that poverty is virtuous, that to struggle is noble, that you will be rewarded if not in this life, then in the next. You hear that the meek shall inherit the earth as long as they stay meek. You hear that wealth is dangerous, corrupting, but strangely never dangerous when it's in the hands of the elite. You're taught to be good, but good is repackaged to mean passive, tolerant, quiet. Turn the other cheek, wait your turn, swallow your doubt. And then, just as you begin to question why nothing is changing, they give you a story, a myth. They show you the homeless man who became a billionaire, the janitor who became a CEO, the immigrant who rose from nothing to everything. They call it proof. Proof that the system works, that the ladder is real, that success is possible if you just want it badly enough. But they don't show you the other side. The millions who climbed until their hands bled and never touched the top. The ones who played by every rule and still lost the game. The ones whose effort was real but whose access was never granted. They don't tell you how many doors were quietly opened for the ones they glorify. They just point at the outliers and say, "See? He did it. Why can't you?" And now failure feels personal, not systemic, not rigged, but deserved. You didn't grind hard enough. You didn't dream big enough. You didn't manifest it right. So you try again, harder this time, more loyal, more patient. And while you do, they introduce one final trap: debt. Buy now, pay later, invest in yourself. You deserve it. Swipe, subscribe, upgrade. You don't earn to live, you earn to repay. You keep moving, keep owing, keep spending, not to survive, but to escape the feeling that you're stuck. And it works beautifully, because when you're in debt, you can't afford to rebel. When you're exhausted, you don't have time to question. And when you're distracted, you don't even realize who's benefiting from your exhaustion. So the machine keeps running, polished, efficient, silent. Not because the poor are weak, but because the tools used to pacify them, education, morality, myth, consumption, are stronger than any cage. And the most dangerous part? They're invisible. And that's exactly why they work. Because the moment you can name a system, you begin to see its edges. You begin to test it, doubt it, question why you ever submitted to it in the first place. And that is dangerous. You see, power doesn't fear poverty. It doesn't even fear rebellion. It fears clarity. Because once the veil is lifted, once people realize the ladder was never meant to reach the top, they stop climbing. They stop complying. They stop believing. And when belief dies, control collapses. That's why the truth has to be buried, wrapped in just enough virtue, just enough patriotism, just enough common sense to make questioning it feel wrong, immoral, ungrateful, dangerous. You're told to honor the flag, respect the system, be thankful for what you have. You're reminded how much worse it could be, how many people have less, how lucky you are to even have a shot. But the truth is, you were never given a shot. You were given a script, A carefully written story designed to keep you moving, working, hoping, without ever asking who's writing the next chapter. And history knows exactly what happens when people begin to rewrite that story. The French Revolution didn't start with pitchforks. It started with realization. The recognition that royalty wasn't divine, just protected. The Paris Commune didn't begin in rage. It began in clarity. The moment working men saw their obedience was building palaces for men who'd never seen a factory floor. The Enlightenment wasn't a movement of violence. It was a movement of vision, a rebellion against the idea that truth belonged only to kings and priests. And every time that vision spreads, systems shatter. Because systems, unlike people, don't survive on truth. They survive on belief. And belief must be maintained at all costs. So the truth becomes dangerous. Too dangerous for textbooks, too controversial for classrooms, too subversive for polite conversation. You won't hear it in a motivational seminar or in a political speech. You won't hear it in ads telling you to hustle harder, because the system isn't built to teach you how it works. It's built to keep you too busy, too tired, and too grateful to ever wonder why you're still running in place. So when someone speaks this truth, not as a slogan, but as a structure, they're not just challenging the system. They're pulling back the curtain. They're naming the lie. And when enough people see the lie for what it is, the game no longer works. Because the game doesn't need force, it needs faith. And the most radical thing you can do in a world built on illusions is to see clearly and refuse to play along. They don't need to lock you in a cage. They just need you to believe the door is about to open. Because when people think they're about to be free, they don't riot. They wait. They tell themselves, I'm close. Next year will be different. One more sacrifice and I'll make it. That's the trap. That's the genius. Machiavelli understood it centuries ago. The most effective form of control isn't violence. It's anticipation. You give people just enough to keep them hopeful, but not enough to make them powerful. A bonus, a promotion, a chance at something better. And if that doesn't work, you feed them stories of those who made it. You say, look, he did it. She escaped. So can you. What you're really saying is, stay in line. Your time is coming. But it never comes. Because the game isn't built on delivery. It's built on delay. Hope, dripped like water in a desert, becomes the leash. And people, desperate for meaning, hold on to it like it's salvation. Even if the system exploits them, exhausts them, forgets them, they defend it. Because deep down they need to believe their suffering is part of something noble. That if they just keep playing, just a little longer, they'll win. And so the worker becomes the believer. The believer becomes the preacher, and the prisoner comes the guard. They'll fight anyone who questions the game, not because they love the system, but because they've invested too much to walk away now. They've built their entire identity around the story, and if the story breaks, so does their sense of self. That's what makes this trap so cruel, so elegant. It's not held together by force. It's held together by fear. The fear that they've wasted their lives on a lie. And rather than face that horror, they double down. They say, work harder, be grateful, your time is coming. And they pass the trap to the next generation, wrapped in the language of virtue. Machiavelli wasn't surprised by this. He said, the masses do not crave truth. They crave the feeling that the truth is just around the corner. They don't want to break the machine. They want to believe the machine will finally notice them. That if they keep their head down, stay loyal, suffer well, one day they'll be chosen. But the machine doesn't choose, it consumes. And every generation that waits their turn feeds it again. So the question is no longer, why are we stuck? The real question is, what are we clinging to that makes staying stuck feel safer than getting out? So the question is no longer, why are we stuck? The real question is, what are we clinging to that makes staying stuck feel safer than stepping out of the story? Because once you see the system for what it is, you face a choice, not whether to break it, not whether to beat it, but whether to keep pretending it was ever built for you at all. Machiavelli wouldn't tell you to burn it down. He'd tell you to stop bowing to it. Because once you know the game is rigged, you don't need to play harder. You need to change your posture. You don't need escape. You need stance. Stop looking for an exit. Start choosing where you stand. You don't need to leave the system, but you do need to leave the illusion that it was ever meant to reward your effort. No one is coming to save you. There is no medal for playing fair, no applause for loyalty. Your kindness is harvested. Your work is directed. Your obedience is flattered, but never liberated. So stop begging the system to love you. Stop waiting for the reward that was never written into your chapter. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious, because the poorest man isn't the one without money. It's the one who still thinks like someone else. Someone richer, someone higher up the chain, still chasing approval, still asking for permission, still trying to be good by someone else's definition of worth. But you don't owe them your logic, you don't owe them your dreams, and you sure as hell don't owe them your silence. You can't change the board, but you can stop believing you were born to be a pawn on it. That alone is freedom. And maybe you still want to play. Maybe you choose to stay in the game. Fine. But know what game you're in. And don't ever again confuse movement with meaning. If you choose to play, play by your values. Play with your eyes open. Play knowing exactly what the cost is and who wrote the rules. But if you find deep in your gut that this game no longer deserves you, then stop letting its myths define you. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not behind. You're just no longer hypnotized, and that makes you dangerous. Because Machiavelli never wrote for kings. He wrote for those smart enough to know how kings operate, and strong enough to decide if they want to serve them or not. So maybe you weren't meant to climb the ladder. Maybe you were meant to walk away from it and write your own definition of enough. Because here's the truth. You were never broken. You were just born into a system that profits when you doubt yourself. A system that teaches you to tie your worth to your output, your morality to your obedience, your identity to your usefulness. And when you didn't succeed, you blamed yourself. But you were never the problem. You were just playing by rules that were never meant to be fair. You see, you're not poor because you failed. You're poor because you believed. You believed the game was real. You believed the staircase led somewhere. You believed if you worked hard enough, waited long enough, were good enough, it would be your turn. But the staircase doesn't lead to the top. It leads in a circle. And while you climb, they collect. While you wait, they advance. While you sacrifice, they scale. And the most brutal part, they convinced you this was fair. That's what Machiavelli saw. Not a war between good and evil, but a structure. A system of perception where the lie must feel moral for the machine to function. He didn't write to start a revolution. He wrote to name the machinery. He wrote for people like you, people smart enough to notice the pattern, people strong enough to stop pretending. Because the most radical thing you can do is not to fight the game head on, but to refuse to be hypnotized by it. Don't expect fairness from something designed to manipulate your loyalty. Don't wait for your moment in a game that was never going to give you one. Machiavelli didn't write for kings. He wrote for the ones trapped under their stories. And if you can't rule the system, at least don't become a piece that it moves. Because when you stop believing it was ever meant for you, you stop chasing its validation. You stop defending your suffering. You stop moralizing your exhaustion. You stop hoping for a seat at a table that was built to feed off your hunger. And in that silence, that calm rejection, you become something the system can't use. You become dangerous, not loud, not violent, just awake. And that's all it takes. Not to overthrow the game, but to no longer be part of its illusion. So if you've ever wondered why you kept giving everything and receiving almost nothing in return, if you've ever felt like the harder you played, the more the rules shifted beneath you, maybe the question isn't, what else can I do? Maybe it's, what if the game was never meant for me at all? And if you've come to that realization, not as a moment of despair, but as a line of clarity drawn in the sand, then you already know you don't need to win the game. You just need to stop bowing to it. And that is where freedom begins.